Hi, this is Lori Rehfeldt with God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee. And I am here today with Candice Sanderson, who wrote the book, and it's in her background, but here you can see it. This is her book, The Reluctant Messenger. And aren't we all reluctant messengers? Sometimes it's like, why did I have to see or hear what I heard? But I know I got to do something with it because it's very, very important. And I'm on a journey I didn't realize I was on. I thought I was going to go to the store and buy something, but instead, God or someone from the universe decided to speak to me. And I just find it so fascinating because I believe it's happening to quite a few people out there in this universe here. And so, welcome, Candice. I'm hoping we can do a part two with this. So, Candice, could you? Sometimes it's easier, I think, if you share a little bit about yourself in regard to um, how you how you got on this journey to be a reluctant messenger. What were you doing before the journey?
Okay.
And
The way I defined myself before I got on this journey was through my training. And my training, Lori, was as a psychologist.
yeah,
So, as a psychologist, I trusted and I believed with my entire heart that the world that I lived in, I could define by my physical senses.
hmm,
If I could not see, hear, taste, feel, or touch something, it did not exist. If I could not measure it with my physical senses, that meant it was either a figment of my imagination,
hmm,
or it was wishful thinking, or as a psychologist, maybe it was pathology. Maybe someone was hallucinating. So that's my life. I led a very practical, a very, very pragmatic, actually boring kind of life
oh,
until one day, and this was August 28th, 2013. I am driving to work early one morning. It's 6 o'clock or so. Sun's not even out yet. I have a very short drive to work, 10 or 12 minutes, and I'm paying attention to the road, but my car's actually almost on autopilot because there's no traffic. And I'm thinking about, oh, I've got all these meetings coming up and what am I going to do and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, I start getting messages from out of nowhere, just out of the blue. My first thought was, what is this? I mean, it was actually a beautiful message. It was a message, and I knew it didn't come from me because it was like almost poetic. And I thought, this is not from Candice, but it was a message about a flower. And they said, and I'm using air quotes here because said is not the correct word because I did not hear it like a hallucination. I did not hear words, but the words came into my awareness with such specificity. It was as if I heard them. I knew exactly what was being said. But it was this gorgeous message about a flower. And it said that a flower, a plant, reaches down through Mother Earth, it's grounded, and then it ascends toward Father Sky. Now, I didn't use words like Father Sky, but
mhm,
anyway, it said when it is in, this plant is in perfect alignment with Source, and I knew the word Source was capitalized, then it produces a flower, and that a flower is a flower. So in my mind's eye, I saw the word flower and I saw it hyphenated, that it is a flower of energy.
oh,
And then the message said that humans too, and Lori, I didn't talk like that. I don't call people humans, it's like people,
mhm,
but humans too, if they are in perfect alignment, if they're grounded in perfect alignment with source or their goals or whatever, then they too can be these flowers of energy. And the whole world is just open to them.
wow,
Well, my first thought was, not from me. I am not poetic. And this was beautiful. It was just so gorgeous the way it was presented to me. But that was a real key sign for me that these weren't my words. This was not my language. I don't know who it was from. And the first thing that I did as a psychologist is questioned it. I start going through the DSM-4, which is like the diagnostic manual that we would use to diagnose people if they had any kind of mental condition. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, okay, psychosis. And I'm going through that list in my mind, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought, no, I'm oriented to time, place, and person. I'm not psychotic. I don't know what this is. So let's just forget about it. So I thought, well, just put that aside. And I just drove to work. Well, when I got to work just a few minutes later, that parking lot's pretty empty. I get there, I grab my bags, and I start walking toward the side entrance of the building where my office is. And all of a sudden, I see this beautiful royal poinciana tree. Now, for those listeners who are not familiar with the poinciana, it's a subtropical tree. It's beautiful. It's wide spreading. It has this gorgeous canopy.
Mm-hmm.
The leaves almost look like ferns. They're just real lacy.
Oh,
And it
nice.
produces this gorgeous flower. The poinciana I was looking at was this beautiful, brilliant, like a reddish orange color. Now, I've passed this tree 100 times. This is just a tree right where I work. But Lori, it was different. This tree called to me. It was only later that I realized, oh my goodness, this is like the first mystical experience of my life. And I just looked at that tree. The sun was just starting to come up. And as it did, there was like a mist on the ground. Light started filtering through these beautiful leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked on the ground, and there is this gorgeous pattern of shadow and light, just like dancing on the ground. And I had this realization that this tree was as much alive as I was. And time stood still. To this day, I cannot tell you whether I was there for 2 minutes or 2 hours. I was just frozen in this beautiful space. And then all of a sudden, my eyes, it's like someone took my head and said, look at this. My eyes went toward this beautiful bud that had not yet opened. And then everything that I had just heard on my trip about the flower, and when it's in perfect alignment, that plant produces this flower of energy. All of that came back to me. And I realized that wasn't nonsense. This event I was having with the tree only reinforced that whatever that was, it was significant. And I knew that I represented that flower, that bud that had not yet opened. And it wasn't just me, it was all of us. So if we stay grounded, and if we have a goal and we're connected to God or source or whatever that greater part of us is, then we too can flow and produce a flower. We can produce our very best. I then went inside the building, not knowing how my life would change from this. I didn't know if this was a one-time event or whether it would happen time and time again, which is exactly what happened. Time and time again, it continued.
It kind of reminds me of you being set up in a way of field of dreams. If you build it, they will come, and you get the sense of, well, I don't know why, but I got to build it, and it's important. And if I don't do it, then I'm feeling as if I'm going to lose a piece of myself, or what you mentioned with the flower, my flower is going to start to wilt a little bit, and I need to keep nourishing it so that it continues to grow. And what's interesting too is that when you talk about being a psychologist and you talk about the way the brain works and the way the synapses and whatnot, and you think, well, is this psychosis? Is this what, all the different thoughts that you were, as a professional, going through? I find it really interesting that no one takes into account that maybe we're actually kind of split a little bit. That what about our soul? Our soul is where the flower is growing. The soul is what's reaching out, resonating, and it's through love, through,
Yes.
and I know that my sister Donna had something similar going on, and hers was coming out through an incident of she owned a limo business, and she's driving a limo. She gets a phone call to find out that her son is in a coma because he had a drug overdose, and everyone was upset, freaking out, and Donna's first she's really beside herself, but she's driving a person right now at that point to one of the big airports in New York. And she all of a sudden she had a voice, and it was calm, and it said to her, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. um it's just pretty much just listen to me. And so when she got to the hospital where he was, everyone was crying and whatnot, and she was the one that was looking at everyone to say, no, he's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Wow.
And of course, her husband was worried to think, are you going through something, a psychosis or whatever, are you losing your mind? And she said, no, no, no. And in her case, she said, I talked to God. God was talking to me, actually. I didn't have that connection until that moment. It was, for her, it was an awakening, which I think is a
Mhm.
really wonderful way of being. And I believe that happened. I could only guess the year it happened in, but um, it's been about, let me see, probably since 2016, 17, somewhere in there, when she started going through this, and her son is able to function. I think he's been going for his degree. He's really has his, it's a gift that he's got his life together. It's a miracle. It is. I mean, nothing. I mean, the doctors were even trying to. He was an organ donor and trying to get his organs, and they're like, no, 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 we're not ready for that yet. That kind of thing. But she's been on that journey
Wow.
since, and that's why I really want to do a part two with you.
We have to do a part two. As
Absolutely.
I heard you tell that story, I got cold chills all
Mhm.
over. And cold chills have always been one of those indicators that when it happens, I need to pay attention, because
Yeah.
whatever is occurring when I get the chills, that person or what I'm seeing represents the truth with the capital T.
Wow.
What
Yeah.
happened with your sister is something that I guess you don't really know until you've been there.
Mm-hmm.
When I stepped into that space where I was getting messages, and well, the drive to work, I didn't really believe it. And, they had to like rap on my head and say, pay attention. And that's why they showed me the tree. But I stepped into such a beautiful, timeless space of divinity
Mm-hmm.
and of love.
Yeah.
And when things like that occur, I don't care what anyone tells you, well, it's just this, it's just that.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you have stepped into a very special space, and the
Yeah.
information that comes to you is truth. She heard God's voice that said, he's
Yeah.
okay. He's going to be okay. And she didn't have to trust it,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're in that space, you know it. You know it to be true.
Yeah. I
Wow.
actually had um it came to me when you started talking about that space. I remember a dear friend of mine, she passed away suddenly. She ended up having a grand mal seizure. And I just felt compelled that I needed to go to her funeral, and I needed to get up and say a few words about her. And I was in the library looking for something to help me to do this. And I ended up finding the book, The Five People You Meet in Heaven. I had it together, and I walk up, everyone said a few things. People were, I mean, not everybody, the people that were brave enough to get up to say a few things. They said, oh, yeah, Laura was a great person and all this. And I got up and I immediately looked out to everybody, and I said, and I showed them the papers in my hands. I said, I know I got a lot here, but I said, please bear with me. And as soon as I started going through it and sharing my story and just reading what I had written down, I felt like I was in a tunnel. And it was like the whole tunnel was, I had to get through what I was saying. And in fact, a few times I started to start to cry and get emotional. And I had to stay in this tunnel. It was like I felt like I was in a connection with the realm that Laura was now in and where I was. And I couldn't even really, being in this realm, it's like my tunnel vision. I didn't really see the people, but I knew um it was just so incredibly intoxicating. And but I just knew that I had to be in there, and the energy that was flowing through me, it was just, it was love. But this
Yes.
love, by the time I got done, it was like a big sigh, like whew, as if I just ran 26 miles, 100 miles an hour. I mean, and I
Right.
sat down and I was like wiped out. And people started like putting their hands on my shoulder, saying, "Oh, that was so beautiful. You did that. That was so, amazing." And I'm thinking, where did that come from?
Mhm.
I mean, it's like it's almost as if someone else kind of guided me, because it knew
Yes.
that I wanted to share something very important about what a beautiful, wonderful human being Laura is and was, and still is. And yeah, it was just, yeah.
And you were being guided, and you actually felt it at the time. You're talking about you're in this, like, this tunnel. Well, we hear people talk about the light at the end of the tunnel,
Hmm.
but part of what that tunnel is, and this is information I'm just getting right now,
Hmm.
it's like it's a cocoon, okay? So you were nestled in this protective energy that connected you to the other side. And the protections that you had were from your dear friend. They were also from angels and guides. And this is what happens when we can step outside the physical, outside of our five physical senses, and we step into a field of energy. And in that field of energy, we start to realize that we are all connected.
Yeah.
There's no Candice versus Lori. We're all the same. We all are connected. And once you come back to that field, from that field to the 3D world that we have to live in,
Hmm.
you've changed. And people will recognize that. They might literally want to come and touch you, because it's like, I want some of what she has. But there's a recognition
Mm,
beyond most people's awareness that you have been somewhere and you have tapped into true wisdom that you can't get from reading a book.
mhm.
And you you change when you're in those fields. I mean, I dare say that your sister changed when she heard that voice that says, your son's going to be okay.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
knew, she
yeah,
knew things that she had no way of knowing, but she knew them to be true, and they were. So when we learn to step outside of the physical, we can start tapping into that wisdom. Now, one question I've had for years since I started channeling was, you know, why me? I'm a
mhm,
psychologist. Why not come to someone who has studied religion or who's, wanted to, commune with angels but why me? And one of my friends, I ended up doing we ended up being friends, but I did an interview with her, Donna Repido, and she has a podcast. Her guide said, "Oh, we need to do a YouTube channel." So I actually have a YouTube channel called The Reluctant Messenger Unleashed. And we have like 24, 25 episodes where we go through my entire first book and we unleash it. But Donna told me, she said, Candice, you were the perfect candidate. Because you were a psychologist, you didn't jump on board and say, oh, I believe all of this. This is great. It's happening.
mhm,
But nor did you say, oh, this is the devil's work. Stay away from it.
mhm.
That my training, and I never thought about it this way, but it allowed me to be that objective observer. And messages started coming in. They started off with people who had passed away. And instead of freaking out or being excited, I just documented. I found that the way the messengers first came to me was that early morning commute. I got to the point where I would pick up my iPhone every morning. I'd get in my car, buckle up. I would hit record, and the messages would just flow. And if I made a mistake, I would hear, and again, not with my ears, strike that. And
Mhm.
they would give me the correct wording. They would tell me, just like dictation, when to start a new paragraph. How to, if there was a word that I didn't understand, they would show me how to spell it, and I would spell it correctly. But after a while, I had pages and pages of documentation. Every night I would come home and I would transcribe the messages I would get. And again, I wasn't judging them. But then I started researching, and the information that they gave me, so much of it I could verify. Like, for example, I met someone named Quan Yin. Well, I grew up as a Southern Baptist in Western Kentucky. I'd never heard of Quan Yin. I was shocked when I looked her up and found out that she existed. She's like the Mother Mary in Catholics, the
Mhm.
counterpart in the Buddhist religion. Lori, I'd never heard of her. But me being brand new to this field and not really interested in it did make me an ideal candidate. It made me reluctant. I didn't just believe everything I received, but it allowed me to research, study, and then it's like, oh my gosh, all this information that I'm getting, there were so many things that I could validate. And I realized this is true
Yeah.
information. I mean, again, true with the capital T. And I didn't want to write a book, but the messenger said, when you write your book, and I'm saying, whoa,
Mhm.
whoa, what do you mean when? And they said, you're going to write a book, but we'll be there to help you. And they did. And I thanked them for it.
Yeah.
But it was just something that I found myself didn't even step into, I kind of slipped into, totally unaware, but it has changed my life. And it's made me see that there is so much more to life than what I was living. It's
Oh,
not, life
absolutely.
is not
Yeah.
just the physical senses, it's being able to step beyond that through an open heart.
Mhm.
And then you just see this beauty that's all around you.
Absolutely. I'd like to share another quick story to piggyback on what you're saying, is that there was a woman I had met. I used to sell insurance in Roanoke, Virginia, so I'm familiar with this with the South, and we would actually go door to door. I mean, we were just, they taught us how to do it and whatnot, and I really found it interesting because I always met really, really amazing people, and so I, I I knock on this door. The first time this happens, I knock on this door, and then I notice there's a note on the door saying, "Please go around the back." So I went around the back. I knocked on the door, and the woman said, "Come on in," but she was somewhere in the house. So I walk in the house, and this woman she's elderly. She's probably in her 80s, but she's in her reclining chair, but she's having difficulty getting up and doing things, and I looked at her, and all of a sudden it's like I had a shift in my brain that said, the voice inside of me said, "Lori, you're not here for what you think you're here for. Just go with the flow." And so I looked at her and I said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And oh, by the way, my name is Lori. And she said, "Could you make me a sandwich, please?" So I went into her kitchen and I made her a sandwich, and I brought it into her with a drink, and sat down. And at that point, I noticed in my head, um, that it was as if I could tell you exactly where they were standing. It was a 7, 8 foot angel was standing over her, and I recognized, and I didn't really say anything to her, but we were talking, and the conversation was very, very sweet, and then when I left there, I felt like I went through another like vortex again. It's like the warm air met up with the outside air. It's like if you're maybe in a spaceship and you go out, and the air is completely different, and they shut the door tight. So I just kind of chalked it up, and then a few weeks later, I'm doing my thing, but this time I'm in a building uh, where it's a lot of Section 8 people live, and I always love to see if I can help people that need help. I mean, so I'm walking down this hallway, and a woman comes out of one of the rooms and said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. My mom needs life insurance." So I walked down, and I don't think in my head like, "Oh, good, good. I'm going to maybe write some life insurance policy right now." So I walk into the room and I see the woman. She is now in her bedroom. The atmosphere in the bedroom was like a blanket that wrapped around anything or anyone that was in it. And I sat down. Now I felt the courage. I felt the room was really crowded, and there were about 4 or 5 angels in the room at this time. And I sat down next to her, next to the bed, and I said, "Are there 4 angels at the foot of your bed?" And she had this serene smile that said, "Yeah." And I said, "I thought so." And we just talked. I held her hand, and then before I left, I kissed her on top of the head, and and I think I probably told her, I love you. You're such a sweet woman." And and I left the room thinking, what just happened, Then the third time this happened, just to give you an idea, it was a woman I met about a year earlier, and she had learned she had cancer. And I went over about a year later, because I don't want to bother people, you got to know. But I'm driving down the road, and I said, I think I got to visit so and so. So I head over to her house. I can't even remember where she lived. So at one point, I passed this one house, and they actually have a dead deer hanging from a tree, which is really weird. But I knew that her house was across the street from it. So I finally knocked on the door. And as soon as I knocked on the door, this woman came to the door. And of course, now I don't even really remember what the woman even looked like. I thought she had dark hair or whatever. So the woman said, "Oh, come on in." I said, "Oh, okay, so how are you doing?" And I'm trying to act, like we know each other because we met briefly. And then she realized that she thought I was somebody else. And "Oh, I know, you want to talk to Anne. Well, she's coming around the corner." And so she comes around the corner, and now, I mean, she needs people to help her get into her chair. I mean, she was like the woman in that Section 8 apartment. Because she died about 2, 3 days later. So this woman, I knew, something was going on. I knew she wasn't where she needed to be. And I also knew that at that point, I said, "I know there are angels in this room, and I am going to figure out where you are because I can feel where your location is." And I did. And I said, "Okay, I know you're over there to the right." And then she sat down, and her husband sat directly in front of her. And I can't believe I was watching this, and I was thinking to myself, to the universe and to God, I was like, "Okay, you've got me here. I'm the only person in this room that doesn't belong here, but I'm here." And then it dawned on me that she was so upset that she was dying that she didn't want to leave, and she felt like she was letting her husband down. I could feel her pain, I could feel it, and it was palpable. And so he walked up. He said he had to go take a shower, so he got up. So it was that point where I said, "I better take this chair because something's telling me that my time is of the essence." So I sat down and I reached for her hand and I said, "I don't know if you remember me." And she had a serene smile and she said, "Yes, I remember you." And I held her hand, and most of the rest of the communication was through her hands and through my hands. And it was saying that, he's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. It's seamless. When he needs you, you'll be there. And I was just trying to tell her that it doesn't end just because when you leave your body, it doesn't end. And we were, we were holding hands really, really, we were like really, 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 really tight. And then at that point, he came in the room and said, he goes, "I'm so sorry. I kind of remember you, but we're so busy right now." And I looked up and said, "I totally understand. I totally understand. I just want you all to have a wonderful day and know that you both are in my heart." And I walked out, and it was a fall day. I walked out, and the cold air hit me, and again I felt like I just gone through another vortex. It was just interesting that anytime I go through these experiences, it's like you mentioned, in a cocoon. And it doesn't happen often, but it was starting to get more regular as time went on. And I'm kind of wondering too if a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're empathetic, that we're intuitive, that in some cases there are things that we accept because it's got to be real. It's got to fit in somehow. But I
Right.
was really, really fascinated about the angels. Well, I thank you again, and this is God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee. I look forward to our conversation again.